every Sunday we talk about life and death, right? We talk about the life and death of Jesus and the promise of salvation and everlasting life, that in Jesus' death, we rise again in our own death, right? And so that's important to think about. And it is wonderful and it sounds wonderful, and we hold on to that. And in the everyday coming and going, while we know that in the back of our minds and in our hearts, how do we live into that here, right? How do we hold on to that promise as we are moving through the daily activities of our lives today? Another thing to think about literally is, how do you understand life? And your definition of life may be different than mine. And what kind of life do you value? What's important to you? Why do you make certain choices in your life? And what about your significant other or people in your family? What's important to them? What do they value? It's so interesting when I encounter spouses that maybe the spouse has made a plan for themselves, but the other partner is not, they don't agree. That wouldn't be the plan for them. And so it makes it difficult, right? It makes it difficult at the end where they've made a plan. It's important to be open and talk about these things. Talk about what you value. What do you consider a good day? What do you value in your life? What are your preferences? The same is true for death. How do you understand death? Here in the clinical setting, we see death in two ways. One, there is death after cardiac death, and there is death by neurological criteria. Now, that for a lot of people can be very confusing, because someone could be dead, clinically dead by neurological criteria, but still have a heartbeat. And so that's very confusing for people, and it's hard for them to really conceptualize that this person is dead. So do you understand death to mean that it rests within the heartbeat? Is that the signal to you that you're still alive, or a person is still alive? This came up, just recently in the Roe versus Wade controversy. And when does life begin? How did you understand that? Taking that into consideration, how do you understand life at the other end? How do you understand what constitutes death for you? What does it mean for you individually? And I think that is a key point, in that what you understand and what you value is really what's important for each person making decisions for their future care. How do you understand where God is in the science, right? So I'm a person who believes that God has gifted incredible people with wisdom and intelligence and ideas and imagination, and that has led to the advancement of medical care and healthcare, and what we can provide for people to help preserve their lives, to help treat an illness. And so I believe that God is in the science, but not everybody does. And so, and sometimes science hits a limit. So where's that threshold for you, that God is in this science, but the science has hit a threshold where it can't provide any more. So where is God in the science? Lastly, if we want to think about, let's go back to our, where we talk about Jesus every Sunday and Jesus's life and death, and we look to Jesus as a model for us and his teachings for us and how to live our lives as Christians. So let's look at Jesus's practices, his actions and his words, because he was practicing advanced care planning even before it was a thing in his own life. He went and did certain actions. And, we talked about advanced care planning, as a process to support people in their understanding and sharing of their values, their life goals, and their preferences regarding the future care. Spoken or unspoken, this is from Grace Johnson. Spoken or unspoken, conscious awareness or not, persons from Christian traditions may have concerns that undermine the advanced care planning, including a conviction that discussion of dying portends death, like it brings on death if you talk about it, a belief in prayer for a cure. We often talk about those that are praying for the miracle, which I think you can hold at the same time. You can pray for the miracle and still continue with making a decision about advanced care. And no, so you shouldn't, we're praying for a cure, so no one should give up. Moral positions on prolonging life, and the fear of judgment from the divine about withdrawing care or transitioning to a different kind of care that isn't curative. But Jesus gives us an example of how to really embrace this notion of talking about our death, talking about how we want to be cared for, how maybe we want to be remembered. And although he didn't have this specific teachings, give us clear directives in the scripture, he did through his words and his action. The week before about the week before he died, and working up to it, I think as well. This, can you all see this graph that I have up here on the screen? If we look here on the left about Jesus's words and actions, he spoke openly about his impending death, despite the resistance of those around him. They didn't want to hear it. No, you're not going to die. No, don't talk like that. How many times do we hear that, right? He participated in a celebration of his life on Palm Sunday, 5 days before he died. He arranged an intimate Last Supper with his friends where he shared symbols of how he wanted to be remembered. He asked his friends to be with him while he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. Come, be around me, be with me, companion me on my journey from this place to the next. He asked his friends to be with him. He had this Last Supper. I remember when my dad died, we got called on a Thursday. My dad was in the hospital and we got called on a Thursday and they said, you better come. He probably won't make it through the night. So we all gathered around his bedside. The clergy were there, and my dad, each of us kids had an opportunity throughout the day to have a private conversation with him. We were telling stories and all of that. And then we gathered around together, and my dad sat on his bed and preached a sermon on God's love, and then laid back, and we all said prayer, and he was anointed, And we just gathered around him. And I can only imagine that if I look at that for me, Jesus was doing the same things with his friends, right? Having this intimate meal, not being afraid to talk about his death, but more embracing it. Not that he wanted it, but embracing it and saying, here, remember me when you do this. Take what I've given you and taught you, take it with you. And he even made arrangements for his mother, for the care of his mother. And he knew that John, and he was able to say to his mom that John would be taking care of her. So then here are some biblical passages that we can rely on that relate to some of these actions, right? So if we're in the context of looking theologically at this and sharing in sermons or conversation, Bible studies, we can talk about how Jesus gave this example for us on how to do advanced care planning. So what all then does that could be the possible applications of that? Again, this wonderful chart from Grace Johnson in her article, Jesus Practiced Advanced Care Planning, Biblical Basis and Possible Applications. So what are you willing to recognize, accept, and discuss your death? Why might this be important to you? Why is it important to you to talk about that? How do you help? I mean, for me, I talk about mine pretty openly in that, and I think it helps prepare people that if we talk about it, it's not quite, hopefully not quite as shocking when it comes. Might you want to celebrate your life even as your death approaches? I had a dear friend who we knew that he was, that the illness that he had that would probably end up being terminal. And it fluctuated so radically that there were moments when we thought he only had days left, and there were moments when we thought maybe months, and he would last another year. But we often talked about, and we're in the process of, actually when he died, in the process of planning, he said, I want to plan my own celebration of life, and I want to be there for it. I want to be with my friends. I want to be and share and be able to talk with them and share my stories and that they can take with them. And I've known other people that have done that. They plan their own celebration and enjoy it and are present with them, with their friends and loved ones. So maybe that's something that someone might want to do. With whom do you want to spend time? There are a select few of people that I have said, I want these people at my bedside for sure. And there are people that if they come, okay. But there are people that were very intentionally for me selected in that I want, if at all possible, present at my ending. When I was in seminary, I took a class on ethics for the sick and dying, and we had to write our own perfect death. And mine was on a deck overlooking the ocean at sunset, and the last thing I heard was my wife singing. So if that can happen, I will be very happy. What are some of your favorite meals? Right? This is important stuff to think about. Where do you want to be? Where do you hope to be? That may not always happen that way, but what do you want around you? Are there symbols? Is there music? What are some of the important things that are for you. If you're familiar with the show 6 Feet Under, at the very end, the daughter, who was a photographer, had a whole wall full of pictures. And when she was dying, that's what she gazed upon. And it was, I just really kind of related to that, and this whole notion that she could literally see her life in front of her because of all of these pictures of people and places that she had encountered in her life. So yeah, who do you want around you? What kind of environment do you want? Do you hope for? This will be a question that would come up if you were in the hospital and in a situation where you could realistically and reasonably transition to comfort care. Do you want to stay in a hospital? Or do you want to go home? Do you know? Do you want a quiet place? And oddly enough, the two places I feel the most home have always been the hospital and the church. So I said to somebody, while I would love to be on a deck overlooking the ocean, it would not disturb me to die in a hospital, because I've lived a lot of my life in a hospital. So it feels like home. And I know that sounds odd, but it's true. So these are some things to think about. These are those theological things that we want to consider as we are thinking about our advanced care planning. So why plan? Well, life is unpredictable. And the last 2 years has definitely shown us how unpredictable life is. And if you are someone who has experienced an unexpected illness, if you are someone that knows somebody that has been in a car accident or a bike accident or whatever. I mean, I had a weird, totally unexpected medical event that I could have died from just recently. And yeah, it would be very important for my spouse to have all this information because you just never know what's coming. I've seen way too many things, having worked in multiple hospitals and trauma centers, way too many things that just convince me that life is so unpredictable that to ease some of the pain of our loved ones, this is a true gift that you can give to your loved ones. To see the emotional dilemma of a loved one knowing that their spouse wouldn't want to live like on a machine or anything like that, and the reality that how very hard that is, right? It goes back to that one notion that was mentioned about this judgment from God, that am I killing them? Am I killing them? I mean, that was my mom asked. She said, when somebody suggested more morphine, and she said, I don't want to kill him. And, there's that fear, a little bit of fear of that judgment or feeling responsible that you ended someone's life. But life is unpredictable. I just put some of the statistics up here. So for 15 to 19-year-olds in 2020, there were 12,278 deaths. And it averages about 58 per 100,000 population for adolescents. And the leading causes were, as we know, kids feel like they're invincible, were unintentional accidents, homicide, and suicide. I used to lead the memorial service every year for the University of Utah students. Of all all the students that had died throughout the year. And every year that list got longer and longer and longer and longer. And I think the first year we had maybe 6 on our list. And the last service I did, we had like 27. And I lived in a state that is a mecca for extreme sports. So skiing, snowboarding, snowmobiling, rock climbing, cliff climbing, ATV accidents, all just really extreme sports. And I have sat with so many parents who have been in this position of their child was severely injured in an accident or killed in an accident, and just lost, especially if they were injured. It's like, what would they be comfortable living with, right? I asked my son when he was 18, I said, okay, you're an adult now. If something happens to you, what is okay for you to, and he said, if I'm functional from the waist up and have all my cognitive abilities, I'm okay with that. And I was like, oh, okay. And if I can't think or communicate with people, I'm not okay with that. So, I mean, it's important to have these conversations so that we know these things about the people that we care about, and because life is so unpredictable. In 2020, we obviously had over 3 million people die. 350,831 people died of COVID. 602,350 died from cancer in 2020. Life is very unpredictable. Illnesses pop up. And I believe the more and more we take actions that harm our earth, the more and more we are putting ourselves at risk for illnesses like cancer. The other thing is autonomy, a plan, because why plan? So that your voice can be heard. So that when a doctor or someone says, what do you think they would want? As much as I know my spouse, I may not know all of what she would be acceptable with. And so it's a hard thing to put yourself in someone else's brain and know what they would want. So making your voice known, making your voice, and already making the decision for your loved ones. And that, for us, on the other side of the bed, is really helpful in that, to see the relief when I say to someone who has an advanced care plan and their spouse is, I just don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I said, you don't have to make any decision. He has already made the decision for himself. You are just giving voice to that. And that is the most wonderful sign of respect and dignity and love that you can give to your loved one, is to honor his voice, right? It helps with some of that anticipatory grief, that struggle between, I don't want to kill them, or I don't want him to suffer either. And then, like I said, it's a gift. Not leaving it in someone else's hands is a real gift. But you should also be very careful. We should also be very careful about who we designate to be our voice. It's important to have that conversation as well, because some will just automatically say, well, my spouse is the best person to make that decision for me, but not always. They may be too close. And my mom was trying to decide, I was always her healthcare advocate or person. And so she was going to move out of state, and this is not true. She thought your surrogate had to be in the same state as you. That is not true. They do not. So she was going to switch to my oldest brother, and I was a little concerned about that. And so I had her sit down, and I said, I want you to think about some of the crises that happened in our family. And I want you to think about how all three of your kids responded in those crises. Think about when dad died, think about this, think about that. Now, if something happens to you and someone needs to speak for you and advocate for you and be your voice based on what you know about how we reacted in those situations, who do you want to be your healthcare directive, your healthcare surrogate, right? And it gave her this way of thinking, oh, yeah, okay. That doesn't make, that's not a good decision, right? So she made a different decision. I've had a wife say to me, I know I'm supposed to tell you to turn the machines off. I know that's what he wants, but I morally can't do it. So I'm going to wait and defer to his sister. Please make sure if you're talking to someone about advanced care planning, if you are advanced care planning, that you are really encouraging people and yourself to really have those serious conversations, because you want to make sure you have a surrogate that will actually be your voice and will actually advocate for your voice that you've already and the decisions you've already made. And we don't want to put people that we love in really difficult positions that they don't feel comfortable with. So it's important to talk about that. So I'm gonna move on, because I do want to leave time for questions and answers. Oh, sorry, it's not going that way. I'm stuck. Come on. Okay, there we go. So how do you start a conversation? Well, those of us that are clergy, we can utilize sermons to open this conversation. We have scripture that we've already looked at, right? Those examples of Jesus and how he did his advanced care planning. This is one of the resources that I'm going to give you is called the Conversation Project. And they really encourage clergy to preach in November. And I happen to be on the rota to preach in November. And the Sunday that they kind of like clergy to do it. And it was prior to Thanksgiving. And I thought, what better opportunity, right? And in my sermon, I talked about when you are gathering around the table with people that you love and you care for and that care for you, what you can't find a better time to have a conversation about, I am grateful for my life. I am grateful for these people in my life. I am grateful for, all the gifts of love and that we have shared. And I love you so much. I want to know exactly what matters to you. What's important to you? What do you value? What do you consider a good life? What do you want? How do you want to transition? in the future? How would you like to be cared for in this illness? Not because I'm trying to be morbid, but because I love you enough that I want you to have the desired life that you want as much as possible, right? Someone said to me once, when I was in a medical situation, that he said, I said, this is what I want. And he said, we will do everything possible to see that can happen. Right. And it was basically, I'm going to do my part, you do your part, and together let's give me the best quality of life I can have. Right. This is what's important to me. So let's see if we can't maintain that. That's what we want to encourage people to talk about. So sharing these examples of Jesus, giving people the courage, helping them understand God does not have a judgment about bringing people comfort and dignity and love. Other ways that we can start the conversation, being willing to just start the conversation in your congregations or with your friends. Do a workshop in your congregation. Do, an adult learning. Start talking about it in marriage prep. We talk about finances. We talk about children. We talk about communication. We should be talking about advanced care planning in marriage prep because it's important. If you expect this person to be in your life partner, and you're going to expect them to be your surrogate, make sure that they're comfortable being that and living into your, advocating for your wishes. And don't put them in that position and you may learn a lot about the person you're going to be marrying in that conversation. So yeah. And youth groups. I know the kids will be resistant of it, but you can make games out of it. We have the Cards Against Humanity. We have I have a game called Game of Phones, and you can make a game out of it. Have them draw a card, and it's got some question on what does a good day look like to you, right? Or if you were in an accident and you couldn't move the waist down, what would you want your mom and dad to do, right? Or, it's just stuff like that. You could put scenarios in there, but you can make it fun. But kids going off to college, their parents aren't with them if they're going off to college. So they're going to be on their own. But what happens if someone, if my kid at 18 is off to college, something happens, he's still going to have me as an emergency contact. So when I get called, and I specifically asked my son, because I know that his dad and I are on two different pages on medical stuff. And so I said, you have to be really clear about what you want, because it'll be hard for us to come together in that. And so kids having, being able to say, no, this is what I want. And I think kids are willing to be open and have those conversations. Young adult groups, we used to have Thanksgiving with some friends from church, two couples and their kids. And every Thanksgiving, I was like, all right, got your advanced care planning? Got your advanced directives ready? Oh, that's right. We got to do that. We got to do that. And it's not something you want to put off till tomorrow, because tomorrow may not be here. But there are resources that can help and guide you. I have said that I will always make myself a resource to the diocese. But I'm going to stop there for a minute or a few minutes and see if there are any questions. And I'm going to open the chat so I can see. Any questions? I don't know if people are typing or not. Oh, wow. Oh. Yep. Yeah, definitely. Thanks for that, Marshall. And it really is. I think, birth and death are very, very sacred moments in our life, probably the most sacred moments in our lives. And they should be respected as such, and cared for. Other comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to move to this last slide. So these are some resources that are available to you here. So here in the state of Missouri, we do not have a Missouri Advanced Directive. So they use a multitude of things. We have an Advanced Directive, I think here, it's a form, but there is one form, but it's not as extensive as the one I have for myself. But there's 5 wishes, and I'll just show you that for right now. And you can go on here and you can get the little booklets. And it helps you, it walks you through a booklet of how to fill out an advanced care directive. Let's look here. You see, you can buy digitally or paper. I'll also show you this is the one that I was talking about earlier, the conversation project. And there are guides. So the conversation starter guide, right? And I really love the way that they just kind of make this a natural, right? What does a good day look like for you? Is it time with family and friends, enjoying your favorite everyday activities? What do you need to enjoy a good life through the end of life, right? I think vacation is a good telling of what someone thinks is a good life or a good day. Some like to just sit and read a book, and some like to go out and explore and adventure and do things. What or who or both supports you during difficult times, right? You've given thought about, who do I rely on? What really helps me helps me feel supported during really difficult times? My faith, family, friends, pets. Are you one of those people that when you're sick, you like to be left alone, or you want to be cared for more frequently? And then try finishing this sentence. What matters to me through the end of my life is, right? What matters to me is I want to be able to go outside, and I want to be able to recognize and communicate with the people around me. Those two things are very important to me. But, are you someone that would not like to be cared for? Do you want to remain someone who is independent? And plan your talk. Having a say in your healthcare is more likely if you share how you feel about certain situations that could arise now or in the future and toward the end of life, right? You can see these as a patient. I'd like to know all the details, and I like all the details. I want to know exactly what the details are and what the plan is, and then I can move forward. Some people really just don't want to know anything about it. So I'm one of those people that been in the environment long enough that I have an iPhone, and on my iPhone there's this little health app, and in my health app it has information, and if you were to get into it, and you could see that I have all of my medications listed. I have a congenital heart defect, so I have all of my I have the information about my defect. I have all of my surgeries listed, and I have, if my medical condition is in question, please, this is when I worked back in Utah, I was like, please consult the palliative care team at the University of Utah, because I had already talked to all of them and said, okay, if I end up on the CVICU and Dr. So-and-so is my doctor, I want you telling my wife the truth, not him, because I know that they would. And so I'm clear about that, but it's also helpful, when I had an emergency and out of state and I had to go to an emergency room, and I was able to pull up everything on my phone and say, here's my condition, here's my medication, I can tell you I'm not having a heart attack. So going through things like this is a really great way together to start talking about what's important to you and what matters. And if you're doing a workshop, this is a really great thing to do and to provide for people as well. All right, I'm going to go back to, we got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to go back to questions and comments. Thoughts? This is really awkward not having any sound. Just an FYI, you can also use an attorney and get write down your advanced care plan, what you want. You can, I would talk to your physician also in that conversation, just for medical purposes. And if you want clarification about what things mean medically. Some people always ask, who should I give my advanced care plan to? You should have one put in a safe place in your home where you keep other important documents. You should definitely make sure your surrogate has access to that. If they don't live in your home, they should have access to your home so that they could get it. You should give one to your physician. Sometimes I recommend, if you've gone and done planning for your own, you've done the church form that you can fill out and planned your own funeral, you could attach your advanced care plan to that and keep that on file. Just making those important people around you aware of where a document is and how they get it. But I would definitely give it to your primary care physician as well. You are correct. A post is not available in Kansas City or Missouri. However, they do have the TPOP. And that is a medical, that's a physician. It's essentially a post, which is a physician order for life-sustaining treatment. It's very detailed medically. And so you would fill that out with a physician. But in Missouri and Kansas, both your advanced care directive does need to be notarized. Yeah, and put who, do you have a preference for a funeral home? Do you have a preference for how you want to be, your disposition, whether you want to be buried or cremated, or where do you have a specific place? Yeah. I want to be buried at sea in Hawaii and with a lei thrown in after me. A purple orchid lei. Purple and white. That sounds specific enough for you. Mm-hmm. Yep, caring conversations. Lots of resources out there, and I can. Any other thoughts or comments? Well, I hope this was helpful, at least for a starter to, and if if you're in a congregation and you think that something like this would be helpful and you want to do a workshop, just reach out to me and I can certainly point you in the right direction for gathering information or come and help you but I think the more we talk about it, the less intimidating it seems. I just think it becomes more of our regular everyday, not so scary to talk about. Because it really shouldn't be. If we believe in that promise of salvation and everlasting life, then I would hope that our death isn't that scary. All right. Well, thank you for joining me